what's going on, everyone? How y'all doing? Welcome back to the channel. Listen, I'm going to rant about something just that's been on my mind for a little bit, and it really does speak to the heart of the internet, of social media, of YouTube, of so many things in regards to movies and entertainment and television and yada, 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 right? So here's the hot take. Movie journalists, movie pundits, people on YouTube, people on social media, they want movies to fail. Why? Simple. They make money. They make more money if a movie fails than they do if a movie succeeds. Weird to talk about, but 100% accurate. Let me explain. If you are looking through a series of headlines and you're trying to get an idea for whether or not a movie has done well or not done well in its opening weekend, you can turn to Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Joe Blow, MovieWeb, Cinema, whatever the blend, fucking Collider, whatever, man. A whole bunch of different outlets, and you'll find some variation of X movie bombs. Rarely ever do you get any of the articles of X movie does great unless it's breaking some serious ass records. And in that case, it's a movie you already knew was going to do well. You just didn't know how well. Like, for example, last year's Deadpool and Wolverine. That movie was a guaranteed smash success, a $1 billion earner for Disney. There's no question about it, no denying. So there's no way for them to spin anything in the negative. So they talk about it and then they move on to something they can attack, right? Some movie that goes up against it. There was some little movie with Kit Harington, right? Like The Beast Within, I think, or it might have been called that, crashed and burned around that same time. So you might see some articles talking about that. Not lifting the movie up, trying to get people to go and see it, because that mindset no longer works. It's probably never worked in the internet age, but movie journalists and movie pundits and movie reviewers at this particular point in time realize and understand that they don't get any kind of traction if they fucking like something. They just don't. They just don't. And social media is the same way. So, for example, like, I don't follow Discussing Film anymore because they blocked me. I mean, granted, I got into a fight with their owner and I told them to block me. But they'll do the same thing Culture Crave does. And any of the other movie accounts on Twitter or social media do. They'll be like, X movie made X amount of money in the box office opening weekend. X movie had its budget at this, it's marketing at this, and it needs this amount of money to break even. Now, what does that do? Psychologically, it shows you if a movie is not on track, if the numbers aren't mathing at that point in time, meaning that the movie's budget, let's say a movie's budget was $100 million. If it doesn't do $100 million opening weekend, let's say it does $20 million. Still number one, but $20 million. They go, that was a big ass flop. Look at Black Adam. I forget the exact budget of Black Adam, but the movie did spend 3 weeks at number one in the US box office. But it failed to go over $400 million worldwide. Would you consider that movie a financial success? Maybe. We don't know how well it did on home video, never mind PVOD, anything like that. So because that information is not available, it is very hard to determine the success of a movie post-theatrical. And since movies now are costing more than they ever did, and concessions now are costing more than they ever did, and the window to get a movie from the theaters to your home video is now shorter than it ever was, and there's this push from some theater owners to go for like 90-day windows compared to the 45. In some cases, it would probably help out, but it would only really help out if the studios weren't treating theaters like clothing retail. And they've been doing this since forever. Okay. Clothing retail operates on a 52-week cycle, meaning new material, new clothing, new designs, new styles every single week. And what happens to those designs and styles that do not sell? They get like sent to like Africa. New stuff comes in all the time. Because we, I guess, as the Western society, need that snappiness. We need that newness. Movie journalists and movie pundits are kind of the same way. If they get into talking about movies And if they're making money writing about movies, they're largely making money based upon the amount of clicks and views those articles and those tweets and those videos get, because a lot of it's based upon the advertising. Advertising is getting harder and harder and harder in recent times, because it's just, the stuff is now being relegated to other things. And so smaller outlets are having to rely more and more and more and more and more on hyperbole, on misinformation, on disinformation, as a way to push these agendas that something is either bad or something is going to burn or something is going to fail. And what that does to the psychology of the average person who is just trying to find out whether or not they should go spend their money at the movies this weekend on something, they get bombarded with headlines. X movie does 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. Well, that doesn't mean that it's a bad movie. It just means those critics didn't like it. And those critics are people you don't read on the regular. Those are critics you don't even generally know exist. There are over 6,600 approved, there's probably more now, Rotten Tomatoes approved critics. And when you go and you look at the opening week of a movie, of a new big movie, it's usually going to be like the same people, because those are the people who have access. Other people who are granted the ability to write for Rotten Tomatoes or post on Rotten Tomatoes, they don't get that instantaneous access. So the stuff that their scores that might elevate or decrease, depending, to be fair, they're not going to be entered into any of that information that is put up front. And so what happens? A new movie comes out, it's got a rotten score. You look to see who's writing the rotten score. That review gets the attention. Not the review that says, hey, this is actually pretty solid, you should go check it out, here's the reasons why. It's that this was utter garbage and trash. And so people who are going to go spend their hard-earned money at the theaters, they see all these attentions. They see all these headlines that just bash and attack, and they call the movie a failure. They call it a bomb. And we live in a society that only wants to back winners. We love an underdog, but you only love an underdog when you can market an underdog. Okay, that's how it works. But in this particular situation, we like to back winners if we're going to back them with our money. And so as a result of that, taking a chance on a smaller movie is something that diminishes and diminishes and diminishes the more a person sees these headlines that just create this negativity, that just create this air of failure around a movie that that the vast majority of people haven't seen. And because a few people come out there who watch movies all the time, who are so jaded and bitter and cynical over what they see because they can't have fun anymore unless it's like something that A24, blows up their ass. All right. Like with elevated horror. That's a whole other conversation, by the way. But they do all that. And then they are just completely controlling the narrative. Rather than the good old days of you going to your friend, hey, what do you recommend? And your friend's like, hey, you got to watch this, you got to watch this, you got to watch this. Okay. We're so isolated now. And this is social media too. We're so isolated now that instead of watching movies together, we choose to watch them alone in a room by ourselves and then maybe comment on them later on somewhere down the road. And I'm telling you guys, there's no greater enemy of movies than critics and pundits and people on the internet. I'm telling you this. Because they're not financially incentivized to talk about what they love. They're financially rewarded to talk about what fails and to amplify what fails and to make you think that everything that doesn't have $100 million opening weekend isn't a success, because movies can have legs. Movies can do well down the road. They can find their audiences down the road. But no, they don't ever want to talk about that because they don't make the money in the moment. And that's what I want you guys to remember about all of this, is that journalists and critics and reviewers and all of these people, these pundits on social media, look at what they do, look at how they approach movies, look at how they talk about movies, and you will see what I'm talking about. You will 100% understand what I'm saying, that they are the enemy of movies, 100%. They might love them, but they've been corrupted and drawn to the dark side.